His experiment would test people's responses to an oppressive regime. Would they accept it or act against it? Zimbardo's experiment was conducted against a backdrop of civil rights activism and protest against the Vietnam War.
There was a sense of student power, student dominance, and student rebellion against authority in general.
It was from the student body that Zimbardo selected his participants. After passing tests to screen out anyone with a psychological abnormality, they were paid $15 a day. Each was randomly assigned to the role of guard or prisoner.
It was a prison to me. It still is a prison to me. I don't look on it as an experiment or a simulation. It was just a prison that was run by psychologists instead of run by the state.
I was 20, and that September I was going to college, and it would be nice to have a summer job, but there sure wasn't a lot of time left. And I looked in the want ads, and I found this thing which was just going to fit. It was just 2 weeks.
Once you put a uniform on and are given a job to keep these people in line, you really become that person. Once you put on that khaki uniform, you put on the glasses, you take the nightstick.
I was on summer break from my first year in college, and I was looking for a job. Had to choose between that and making pizzas. That sounded like a lot more fun.
As well as running the experiment, Zimbardo took on the role of prison superintendent. He began by briefing the guards.
I said, you have to maintain law and order. If prisoners escape, the study is over, and you can't use physical violence.
You can create a sense of fear in them. You can create the notion that their life is totally controlled by us, and that there'll be constant surveillance. We have total power in the situation, and they have none.
Prisoners were brought to the basement prison, blindfolded, to confuse them about their whereabouts. They were stripped and deloused.
Of course, the guards started making fun of their genitals and humiliating them. And really, it's the start of what's known as the degradation process, which not only prisons, but lots of military-type outfits use that process.
When I first got here, even though I had to strip, when they would call me names, I still didn't feel at all like I was in the prison. I was just looking at it as a job.
I recall sort of walking up and down the very short hallway, which was the prison hall, and looking in on the prisoners, and they're basically lounging around on their beds. I felt it was like a day in summer camp.
The first day I said, this might be a very long, very boring experiment, because it's conceivable nothing will happen.
I arrived independently at the conclusion that this experiment must have been put together to prove a point about prisons being a cruel and inhumane place, and therefore I would do my part, to help those results come about. I was a confrontational and arrogant 18-year-old at the time, and I said somebody ought to stir things up a bit here.
On the second morning, the prisoners had decided to stir things up as well. The guards found some of them had used their beds to barricade their cell. Prisoner 8612 was one of the ringleaders of the rebellion.
Initially, I was stunned. I didn't expect a rebellion because not much happened. I mean, it wasn't clear what they were rebelling against, but they were rebelling against the status, rebelling against being anonymous, against having to follow orders from these other students.
As punishment for the rebellion, prisoner 8612 was put in the hole, and the guards turned on the other prisoners.
The guards felt that they now have to up the ante of being tough. The prisoners made the mistake of beginning to use profanity against the guards in a very personalized way. So not against the guards, but, you little punk, you big shit, and so. And the guards got furious.
Everybody out! Well, gentlemen, here it is time for count.
Prisoners were repeatedly woken in the middle of the night. The guards made them do menial, physical tasks and clean out toilets with their bare hands.
We made it a point to not give them any sense of comfort or what to expect, that anything could happen to them at any time, including being rousted from their sleep at any hour and forced to stand up in a line and have me hurl insults at them and make them do exercises. When you interrupt people's sleep, they tend to become a little disoriented. And since there was no daylight in the prison, they had no idea whether it was night or day. I think that I was the instigator of this whole schedule of harassment.
The harassment of the guards took its toll on rebellion leader 8612. He told Zimbardo he wanted to leave the experiment. Zimbardo responded not as a psychologist, but as a prison superintendent.
I said, well, I can see to it the guards don't hassle you personally, and in return all I would like is some information from time to time about what the prisoners are doing. So essentially I'm saying I'd like you to be a snitch, an informer. And I said, think it over, and if you still want to leave, fine.
Confused, prisoner 8612 returned to his cell and told the other prisoners that no one could leave.
He believed that we wouldn't let him go, although we've never said that. But the fact that he was the ringleader of the rebellion, and he told the other prisoners, they won't let you leave. And that really transformed the experiment into a prison.
I was told that I couldn't quit. And at that point, I just felt totally hopeless. More hopeless than I'd ever felt before.
Soon after returning to his cell, prisoner 8612 started showing signs of severe distress.
God damn it! You're fucked up! You don't know! I mean, God! I mean, Jesus Christ, I'm burning up inside, don't you know? I just fucking can't take it.
He came up with a plan that if he acted crazy, we would have to release him.
I'm so fucked up inside. I feel really fucked up inside. You don't know. I gotta go. To a doctor, anything. I can't say that. I'm fucked up. I don't know how to explain it. I'm all fucked up inside. Out! Now!
It starts with make-believe, and then he's doing it and cursing and screaming and, whatever that little boundary is that he moved across. Not that he became really crazy, but he became, excessively disturbed. I mean, so much so that we immediately said we have to release him.
As an experience, it was unique. I've never screamed so loud in my life. I've never been so upset in my life. And it was an experience of being out of control.
The boundary between reality and make-believe was to become blurred even for Zimbardo. A rumor circulated that released prisoner 8612 would return with friends to liberate the remaining prisoners.
I quickly convinced myself that, my most important function was, not to allow this prison liberation to occur. And what can I do to keep my prison going, not the experiment going?
The prison was dismantled and the prisoners moved to another part of the building. Zimbardo waited in the empty corridor, preparing to tell 8612 and his friends that the study was over, when a colleague appeared and began asking questions about the scientific basis of the research.
I'm trying to get rid of him. And then he says, what's the independent variable? I get furious because he doesn't understand that there's a riot about to take place, that this prison is about to erupt. I had totally lost this whole other identity of scientist, researcher, psychologist.
The rumored jailbreak never materialized. The guards had dismantled the prison for nothing and had to rebuild it. They took their frustration out on the prisoners.
They escalated again the level of control, the level of dominance, the level of humiliating behavior.
"819 was the next prisoner to rebel against the harassment of the guards. He barricaded himself in his cell and refused to take part in the count.
You're not only not getting a cigarette, but for as long as the cell's blockaded, you're going to be in solitary when you get out.
For 819's disobedience, the guards made his cellmates do mindless work. This undermined any vestige of solidarity amongst the prisoners, who now chose to accept the tyranny of the guards rather than risk further harassment.
That was one of the surprising things to me, is that there was so little that the prisoners did to support one another after we started our campaign of, divide and conquer.
Isolated and distraught, prisoner 819 told Zimbardo he wanted to leave.
While I'm interviewing 819 and saying, okay, it's all over, thank you for your participation, I'll give you money for the whole 2 weeks, even though you're leaving early, he hears the prisoners shouting, 819 did a bad thing.
Prisoner 819 did a bad thing. Prisoner 819 did a bad thing. Prisoner 819 did a bad thing.
And he said, I can't leave. And he's crying. And he says, I can't leave. I said, what do you mean you can't leave? He said, no, I have to go back. Because I don't want them to think that I'm a bad prisoner. And that's when I really flipped out. That in such a short time, a college student's thinking could become so distorted. I said, you're not a bad prisoner. You're not a prisoner. And this is not a prison. And it was this thing where he opened his eyes. And it was just really like a cloud being lifted.
Seeing things clearly, prisoner 819 reverted to his original request and was released. To replace him, the experimenters called in one of their reserves from the standby list.
I got a phone call saying, are you still available as an alternate? Kind of cheery female secretary voice. I said, yes, sure. And so she said, could you start this afternoon? And I said, yes, sure. And my role in the experiment really began. I was blindfolded and then stripped and supposedly deloused.
He came into a madhouse, full blown. All of us had gradually acclimated to the increasing level of aggression, the increasing powerlessness of the prisoners, the increasing dominance of the guards. And he comes in and says, what's happening here to the other prisoners? And they said, yeah, you better not make trouble. It's really terrible. It's a real prison. And he says, I'm out of here. I don't want to. And they said, no, you can't leave. Once you're here, you're stuck. This is a real prison.
416, you got your hands in the air. Why don't you play Frankenstein? 293, you can be the bride of Frankenstein. You stand here.
Prisoner 416 was soon subjected to the harassment of Dave Eshelman, nicknamed John Wayne because of his macho attitude.
416, and I want you to walk over here like Frankenstein and say that you love 293.
Frankenstein walk.
I made the decision that I would be as